Mr. Mayor, as you said, this is the presentation to the council on the, I call it the final draft version of the work program. This resulted from your January 17th meeting when you gave the staff and our consultants the direction to proceed with a work program that included the community engagement, a full land use alternatives analysis, and to reconvene our general plan advisory committee to participate and help guide the process. As you saw in the staff report, I'll also briefly mention there's two other components in the overall contract with our consultants, Minter Harnish, regarding updating the zoning ordinance and updating the city's infrastructure master plans to reflect the general plan. The community engagement strategy, as we point out in the staff report, has multiple components, almost all of which were used in the prior process, and certainly will be again this time. Kind of highlighted in bold there. The one new component that we felt very important in this particular case is to really involve the stakeholders in both our housing and economic development discussions on the updating the general plan. So we'll be having what we're calling stakeholder forum on each of those topics, where we'll invite in both some local stakeholders and also possibly some outside expertise to help just get to the real heart of the issues in both those cases to help guide the discussions of the general plan. The key issue that got us both stopped and restarted was the approval of Measure H, and I showed this slide at the last meeting that there definitely are changes in our land use capacity as a result of Measure H that do prompt an opportunity and the necessity really to kind of go back and look at the alternatives and the options, and that's what we're doing per your direction. And the key components of the general plan process, they are many and very wide in their scope, and all of these will be part of the alternatives analysis that we'll be working on with the GPAC and having a community meeting on the same subject, and then come to council. Kind of the summary of the work program, again, we'll be having 9 GPAC meetings, developing 3 alternatives as we did previously. We hope to have the opportunity to include some of the results and the conclusions and the interim guidance, if you will, from the high-speed rail master plan process to the best of our ability, timing being what it'll be. A full technical and policy analysis that results in an alternatives report. The GPAC will review the alternatives report and give its input, and will also go to the community and present the results of that report to help guide developing a revised preferred land use alternative that'll be recommended to the Planning Commission and Council. And we'll have study sessions with both Planning Commission and Council. And then kind of taking off where we started or stopped, I guess you could say, to complete the environmental impact report based on the revised plan and going forward with public hearings on the adoption of the plan. The 2 other components I mentioned a minute ago that are also part of the project, the zoning ordinance update. We are underway with a comprehensive update of the zoning ordinance that we moved over to work on somewhat during the hiatus for the general plan. But we found necessity to excerpt 3 specific topics to kind of have expedited work by our consultants for various specific timing reasons. Our wireless communications ordinance, it was somewhat out of date, and especially with some of the most recent land use law, telecommunications legislation that we had to make sure we were up to speed on. Also, our water efficient landscaping and low impact development, stormwater type ordinances were out of date, and by order of the Central Coast Water Quality Board, through a notice of violation, we needed to get on those right away to bring those up to snuff as well. So our consultants have been working kind of separate and parallel on all of those, and they're moving forward apace. And then the infrastructure master plan updates that were last updated after the last general plan was approved. Once we have the new general plan and know its capacities and its needs in terms of infrastructure, those master plans will all be updated. And those are already in progress. The schedule is a total of 30 months. As I tried to explain in the staff report, really we've kind of gone back, you might say, about 18 months worth of effort that we're sort of redoing and revisiting in terms of the land use alternatives analysis and revising the plan documents and redoing the administrative draft EIR. And then the final 12 months, the draft EIR and final EIR, really the steps that we had about where we stopped. We had not completed those. So,
Stan, I think that's an important point, though, because when reading through the staff report, when you think about the total elapsed time, 30 months, it seems like a very, very long time. But in actuality, you're really looking at the 18 months, which is the time to take a look at phase 4 and 5, I think it is.
That's right.
And then the remainder of that time was time that was going to get programmed into the general plan anyways for the eventual EIR adoption.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct. Thank you. In terms of the budget, as we show here and in the staff report, the amount required for the rework of the general plan and the EIR, we had the consultants go back to make the necessary revisions to the 2020 general plan, which is what Measure H actually amended as of the date the provision became effective. So we did have to go ahead and do that because that plan is in effect until we approve the adopted plan. So there was some cost there. And then the zoning ordinance updates I just mentioned that we've kind of pulled out and moved on separately. And then the infrastructure master plans will have some updating required as the new data and information comes out of the revised plan.
Stan, before you leave that slide, can you explain where the money is going to be coming from within the city to pay for these costs?
Next slide.
You read my mind.
Always happy to do that. Back in 2014, the city instituted what's called the general plan, actually it's called the next general plan, fee surcharge on development permits, which is very common throughout most cities that has a way to help fund the long-range planning. So as of December of 2016, that fund had $430,000 some odd dollars in it. There's an average that works out to about an average of $170,000 a year that was collected. So applying that kind of an average throughout the rest of the general plan process, we get to $884,000 some odd dollars available, in the pot, if you will, for the fund. And actually, it had always been anticipated that the general plan fund also paid for the 9212 report. So there's actually another $150,000 that was anticipated to be reimbursed from the general fund. So we feel there is adequate funding for this much work that we need to go forward and do. We also describe in the report about proposed changes to the General Plan Advisory Committee, starting with retaining the current membership minus the youth commissioner position, which unfortunately it was just really tough to keep a youth commissioner present during the meetings, whether it was year of graduation or timing or youth activities. So we thought we probably should just delete that position. We're proposing to add 5 positions, a member of the Community and Neighborhood Revitalization Committee, Downtown Association, Gilroy Gardens, People Acting in Community Together, PACT, and Gilroy Growing Smarter. And so there's a footnote in the little table about the GPAC that we'd actually had 3 at-large members leave for one reason or another during the process, so we were down 3. Minus the youth commissioner is down 4, and you add 5, we end up with only 1 additional from the original number of members of the GPAC would be 26.
I'm sorry, can you go back to that slide there?
Of course.
I have a question, and again, I think that it's important that we have every segment of our community involved in these committees. The one group that I don't see represented here, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is I don't see the Latino community represented anywhere here. So unless they're hidden somewhere in there, I don't see a group from the Hispanic community that's going to be on this committee here.
No, thank you for asking. I think our goal is that The Community and Neighborhood Revitalization Committee is composed mainly, as I understand it, of members of the community on the east side of Monterey. So we would stress, and in fact, that's the point, is to get somebody from that general community, number one. And I think the people acting in community together, we also hope certainly representing, underrepresented groups.
No, and I appreciate that, and I hope that, that is the case when we sort of outreach for those
Yes.
individuals. Thank you.
Absolutely. And each of those groups, let me also mention, these are all self-appointing. They will be asked to appoint a member.
Okay, thank you.
Stan, how did we come to the determination that the youth commission shouldn't have a seat there besides, the absenteeism? I mean, we've just renewed the entire youth commission here. And it seems to me that one thing we're trying to do is draw the youth back into the community, and excluding them is quite the opposite.
Appreciate your input at your discretion to add back in. Certainly, yeah, it was really that. It was difficulty in keeping membership present in attendance. That was the bottom line, but so
Thank you.
appreciate your input and direction if you want to change that.
I do have another question. I just trying to go back on history, and I don't know, maybe somebody else can tell us, but I thought the PACT was a political action committee. And in the past, we were always talking about neighborhood committees, not a political action. Is the PACT a political action committee?
Councilmember Tucker, you're talking about PACT, correct?
Yeah, the
It is not a political organization.
It's not registered with the FPPC as a political action committee?
No, it is not.
Okay, that's why I wanted to double check.
We have a couple representatives here tonight who are in the crowd from PACT, and they're also signaling that they're not.
That's what I wanted to double check. But also in the past, I don't think we allowed that, did we? I don't know.
A community group? Or?
No, a political action committee group. I don't think
I
in the
don't believe we
past.
did, but
Okay.
they would not qualify.
Okay, that's what I wanted to double check.
But I do want to kind of follow up on that, because one of my concerns is whether it's the people acting in community together or Gilroy Growing Smarter, it seems, especially with regards to Gilroy Growing Smarter, obviously that organization was very much involved in the last election, and that's all fine and dandy. But I believe that organization also has some members also on the committee itself. And so my concern is a little bit of stacking the deck. Am I?
I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that there were previous members, there were members on the previous committee who are also members of Gilroy Growing Smarter.
That's correct. And so now by offering them a specific slot, we potentially could be adding additional members. And that's a policy decision of the council. I'm just trying to raise it as a possible issue. Am I mistaken?
Honestly, I'm not specifically aware. I was just going to refer you to Table 4 in the staff report, has all the list of affiliations, not the individual members' names, but the affiliations that are now and would be proposed to be part of the GPAC, if that helps. No, I'm not specifically aware of.
Yeah, see, so I looked at Table 4, and it just shows the groups, but not the people affiliated with it. And I'm just trying to wonder, well, this is not a hill I want to fight and die on, so. All right, please continue on.
Thank you, sir. Just to the recommendations, recommend approve the work program, schedule, and budget, and the revised composition of the General Plan Advisory Committee. And third, direct the city administrator to execute an amendment to the current agreement for services with Mintier Harnish for an amount not to exceed $687,000. That's staff report. Can answer more questions.
Thank you so much. We have a question from Councilmember Tucker. Councilmember Dion Bracco.
Stan, on the groups that you want to add, where did those come from? Did they ask to be put on, or did you just make up a list?
The only one that asked was Gilroy Growing Smarter, made a specific request, and the others were in conversation with the city administrator and staff. looking honestly, per Councilmember Tovar's comment,
Have we reached out to those groups to see if they even?
not yet. I was waiting for
'Cause
council
I know
direction.
we have a problem with getting people to show up. So, I mean, appointing people on there that ain't gonna show up don't do a whole lot of good.
It is an invitation, you're, in that respect, you're right. So, but we were waiting for council direction to confirm it, and going to do that tomorrow, per your direction.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Fred Tovar.
Thank you. Stan, quick question, just sort of looking at the affiliation, the list of affiliations here. I see that the Gilroy School District is on this list. Just educate me, have they been part of this committee?
Absolutely. Active.
No, it's wonderful.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Did they show up?
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Members, I'll say that about
Good
James.
question, yeah.
Okay, public comment. Anybody from the public want to, whoa, and here goes the list. All right. Ms. Connie Rogers, followed by Bill O'Connor. Thought I saw Bill here earlier. Oh, there we are. And then followed by Carolyn Tognetti.
I'm trying to get the vote screen back up. There it is. That's right. It's my job.
Connie, welcome back.
Good evening again, council members. First, I want to thank you very much for inviting Gilroy Growing Smarter to be part of the committee. And
Oh, we didn't invite. I thought you guys asked.
we asked and you invited.
Okay.
And you invited 4 other wonderful groups too, and that is great. So I wanted to say thank you and compliment all of you because I think this shows real inclusiveness and reaching out to the community. And, first off, yes, Gilroy Growing Smarter was a political action committee during the last election, but we don't plan on doing political activity.
Wait. But was Gilroy Growing Smarter a true political action committee in the truest sense?
Well, we filed financial reports with the Fair Political Practices
Sounds like you were then.
Commission.
Okay, all right.
Okay, anyway, but we do not plan to be doing that in the next couple of years. I mean, we do, and frankly, addressing the concerns of Councilwoman Tucker and Mr. Bracco and Mr. Tovar. We have knowledge of PACT. It stands for People Acting in Community Together. It is a primarily Spanish-speaking group sponsored by St. Mary Church. Other than that, I've been introduced to their leader, Jorge, and I don't know any more than that. I think it's great that Gilroy Gardens is having a representative because they're certainly one of our star attractions in Gilroy. Anyway, you did a good job. The staff did a good job choosing a wide range of community groups for input. And I also want to say, we don't know yet who the representative from Gilroy Growing Smarter will be. We are thinking at this point to put it out to our most involved members to see who would like to participate. So I do want to thank you for the invitation and thank you for soliciting broad public input.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to point out that you cannot appoint Carolyn twice, and she does not get 2 votes.
No, she doesn't. She was representing the environmental community, which on the commission, on the general plan committee, not Gilroy Growing Smarter.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Bill? Bill,
Mr. Mayor,
thank you for being here.
council members, I didn't know this was on the agenda, so I hadn't prepared anything, but having seen the presentation, I'm kind of interested with the thought of community involvement and reaching out with these, looking to the community that Stan talked about, because I don't know why anybody in the community would bother doing it. I attended all 4 of the workshops that we had with the GPAC. I attended the majority of the GPAC meetings. The community wasn't, the people, the GPAC was not interested at all in what the community said. They came out, there was a presentation from the consultants and said, this is what the community said. There wasn't a single question from the GPAC committee. Nobody said, should we change our minds or should we look at things a little different? Now, I know that they weren't as informed as everybody else, but you had a meeting out at Elliott School where you had over 200 people that one of the things that they were asked to do was set their priorities out of the 15 subjects that you said, here's the priorities. They were different than the priorities of the 24 people there. Now, you would have thought if you were really interested in what the community said, you would start considering what they said their priorities were and at least say, maybe we should change this, as opposed to, there wasn't, again, no discussion. So, I mean, I went to the 4 workshops. I don't know why I would go again, and I don't know why any members of the community would go, because, I mean, they were heard, and then it was reported on, and they were ignored. Okay? I think the reason, why do we ask this? I think it's so you can check a box that said, we got community involvement. Not that we care, but that they at least said something. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
And-
just want to point out that the downfall, I'm just pointing out to the rest of the council, the downfall of having one person representing each of these specific groups is exactly what was just stated. Because everybody's going for their own specific, you see all the list here, different people looking at the general plan from their own committee, whether it's arts and culture or parks and rec or planning or whatever. So they're going to be looking at it from that perspective. And it's true. Maybe they don't care about what the citizens is. They're only caring about. So that's kind of the balance, right? It's the downfall. Either we have a representatives for all these community members, and there are 7 at large. Wait, not 7. There's a certain number at large that are going to be requested.
I think
So
it is 7.
it's hard to try to come up with the right formula, but that is the downfall of this type of formula in my mind.
So, and I think the other thing too is, Mr. O'Connor, I certainly hear your concerns and your frustration, and it's important to note that it's that kind of frustration that sparked the Measure H ballot initiative. So, yeah, maybe they weren't heard initially, but no, I understand, but the community sent a very loud message in November. Carolyn.
Yes, Carolyn Tugnetti, thank you very much. I have been a member of the General Plan Update Committee as the environmental representative. I'm very happy to serve again and continue and finish this process with Measure H in place. I'm very excited about that. I'm excited to implement it because I do feel, as Bill said, that Measure H, and as you just said, Mayor, that the Measure H does represent the community's wishes and those wishes from those workshops. Most of those people wanted this kind of things that Measure H has put in place now. I do feel we should add a few more. I think we should bring the committee membership up to 30. I think we should add 4 more at large. The committees that they have, or the focus groups that they've added, are fine with me. I really was going to recommend, before I even saw it, that we have somebody from downtown, because that's going to be a very key position. And yes, Dion, the representation needs to show up. I agree, it doesn't always happen, but one of the things I'd like to make sure too is from these appointed groups that the group will appoint the person, if that appointee can no longer serve, or some reason, that they can reappoint somebody to come in and, fill that spot, not leave it empty. And that seemed to happen in the last go-around. So if you have any questions for me, I think Walt Glines is the only other person, Mayor, that is on Gilroy Growing Smarter. Originally, when I was picked, I was from Save Open Space Gilroy. But now that Gilroy Growing Smarter has evolved, I am a member of that too. So for all
As I said, you don't get 2 votes.
I I won't get 2 votes.
right,
I'm
good
just
enough.
the environmental representative, and and I'm happy to represent that philosophy. So,
Great.
thank you very much. If you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them. And
Thank you.
so,
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Any other speakers? Seeing no speakers. Okay, so we have, oops. Okay, you're not a rookie. This isn't your first day. Submit a card.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Sometimes you hear things and you just have to get up. I actually came up tonight to just kind of confirm what Carolyn Tognetti just said and what Mr. Connor just said. That when we had our joint meeting, Planning Commission and Council, you may recall, I recommended when we talked about the GPAC that we increase the number of members at large. And the reason for that is because you do have, if you look at your list, a large number of stakeholders. And tonight, the recommendation is to add in additional stakeholders. Now, stakeholders are community members, but they represent the organizations that are listed there. And so they come with a certain perspective. And if you put more members at large on the committee, you're going to get a much more well-rounded committee. Also, during the last process, there were 3 members, I believe, members at large that dropped off the committee, and they were not replaced. The members at large should be treated the same as the members of the stakeholder committees. If a stakeholder dropped off, they could put a new member on. If a member at large dropped off, they got left off because they'd have to come back to council and get a new seat appointed by council. So if you're going to let the stakeholders hold a position, if their member drops off, then you need to have the members at large have that same opportunity where the council would appoint somebody to take their place or have an alternative list or something along those lines. Because you lose the benefit of having the members at large. And one of the reasons that Measure H came was because the members at large were ignored. So please consider putting more members at large on the committee. Thank you.
So, okay, anybody else? So we do have some possible actions. Let me bring it back to council. I did have a question for Stan before we have council start talking about this. So according to attachment 4, we have 7 at-large members, and 3 members have left the GPAC, which leaves us a balance of 4 at-large members.
Pardon me, I'm just trying to go back to that slide for you. I'm not getting there. I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting you.
No worries.
Well, I don't have the slide with the full, the 5, no, that's the table you're referring to, yeah. The table, yeah.
So, again, we have 7 at-large members, 3 have dropped off, and that left us with 4 members. Any thought with concerns about adding those members back?
Not really, not for staff. I think what was being referred to, and it's important that it be brought up, that we did have basically a policy that council helped us establish that said what was described here, that the at-large would not be replaced. So that could be part of the direction, as well as if council wants to add additional at-large.
Now, I wasn't part of the council when that policy was adopted, and I'm assuming that the reason, and maybe Kat could talk about it, I'm assuming that the reason why that was implemented was because they didn't want to keep kind of going back and kind of starting over, trying to bring up a new person up to speed on the matters. Is that accurate?
And the consultant also suggested a lower number committee. Their idea was that if we got too high, then we would be boggled down with question of, the meeting wouldn't
too high.
progress. Too high membership.
I see, a total membership. All right, Tom.
Thank you.
So my question is, you don't have any heartburn about that?
No, what Tom was just saying, make sure it's clear that we started with 10 at large lost 3, so we had 7 that completed the process. So just to clarify for you, if that's well, so we
7,
show.
not 4.
Yeah, that, Tom realized that I may not have understood your comment
Well,
correctly.
yeah, I'm
so-
just looking at your attachment here. It says at-large members, number is 7.
Correct. That's how many we finished the prior process, and we are now recommending, currently we're recommending to just go forward with that number as opposed to discussions about adding.
Okay,
some
so the
additional-
note says 3 at-large members left the GPAC process and were not replaced. So it's not 7 minus 3,
No,
it's 10
right,
minus 3.
Exactly. Thank you.
Got it, okay. Okay, so your recommendation is to add the 3 and bring us back up to full strength at 10. And then one of the things that that the public is asking is that if at any point one of those members gets replaced, then the council could bring another person. Okay.
One comment I'd like to make, and maybe the city clerk wants to clarify as well, that those positions, at-large positions, were done through an open selection process, which would have to occur, we'll have to make that occur, which is doable. We need to do it
Application
for the
process.
affordable housing rep, as we mentioned as well, but
And
that's the
when is your
process
first meeting happening?
we're at. Aiming for the end of June, if we can possibly do it, so I don't know.
So we need to
maybe
get something
we'll have to
scheduled
work
for
on it
May.
right away, but yeah.
Okay. And then if the council's okay with those new positions, again, you know. And then I just wanted to clarify that when a member of one of the special interest groups drops off, that group is able to replace that person. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. So I think we do have to be consistent across all.
Will do.
All right. I think that's it for now. We have some questions. Councilmember Tovar.
Thank you. So I just want clarification. I have some thoughts. So I know so when we look at the at-large members, so currently, again, we're at 7. From what I'm hearing from community members is that they would like to move that up to 11, adding 4 more, which would make the total membership group of 30, correct? Okay. And I also understand the concern of, special interest from, from different groups and people not showing up, but I don't think it's our responsibility. If I'm in agreement with adding 4 more at large to make the 11, making it total. And again, it's going to be up to the community members and these individuals to show up to these meetings. But I think having a larger at large membership will help sort of curtail the sort of special interest that some groups may have. So me personally, I would be in favor of adding 4 more at-large members to make that 11 with a total of 30.
Councilmember Klecker.
I attended many of the GPAC meetings, and it was discouraging and disappointing at sometimes when there was a lack of membership. And I hope we can fix that, and it looks like we're trying to. I share Commissioner Fisher's opinion that perhaps we could add more at-large members. My concern is, this is a dilemma, I don't know how to do this, but that they should somehow be excluded as members of some of the other groups that are already on there, like PACT or whatever. So I'm not sure how we go about doing that, but to me, that's a problem area. So that we don't have double and triple representation from some groups. Otherwise, I support the idea of additional members, and I think that was a drawdown, or that was a drawback in the first group. And let's say I attended many of them as a observer. I was not on the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harney.
Yeah, likewise, I share some of the same concerns that we want to make sure that we have a cross-representation of the community. And as we all know, and those that regularly attend city council meetings, there's a lot of familiar faces out there. And I was looking at the census data earlier today, and it suggests that in 2000, our city was somewhere around the population of 40,000, and today we're closer to 56,000. And so if you really stop and think about that, that's about a 50% increase. And so as our city grows, what are we doing to reach out to those new citizens that have joined our community, and what are we doing to include them, and what are their wishes? So that's my first point. I'd like us to agree on how we're going to go through the selection process of the members at large, and also those that that have, are in the special interest groups, or excuse me, maybe that wasn't the right word. But what if there's two members on your group and both of them have valid candidacies? So, and then finally, I really want to see Youth Commission brought back up onto this council. The youth are often excluded, and I think it would be just a shame to not have them here. Most people that I know that have grown up in Gilroy leave Gilroy and come back to Gilroy. And that tells me that there's something here for their community and they want to be part of it. So I think we should keep the youth at heart here.
Thank you. Councilmember Lerone Munoz.
I'm going to echo Councilmember Harney's remark about having the Youth Commission involved. I mean, absolutely. We're seeing as millennials get older and they start to integrate themselves more and more into a community, they're radically shaping the nature of that community and what they're looking for in a community. So they should be part of that discussion as well. And a thought that came to me as we're discussing how best to apportion some of the at-large people. One thing that I also wanted to build on that Councilmember Harney mentioned as well is that we do see a lot of the same faces, but we also have a lot of the same regions within the city that are represented. So it might be worthwhile to consider geographical representation as well, as certainly we don't want to minimize the representation of people who might be in an area that's often overlooked. So geographical representation might be one criterion we can consider when deciding.
Thank you so much. Anybody else want to speak? Okay. So let me see. With regards to the at-large members, excuse me, let me start with an easy one. With regards to the Youth Commission, do we want to kind of generally see if that's possible? Okay, and then Maria, just kind of nod your head. You staff the Youth Commission? Okay. So maybe what we could do with regards to the Youth Commission is send a very clear message through staff to the Youth Commission that, that the council's requesting one of them participate, and then also ask them to have an alternate so that they could coordinate amongst themselves as to whether or not, they could attend the meeting or whatever. And if in the event one of them terms off the commission, ends up going off to school or something like that, at least you have the alternate in play. And then to that end, one of the things that I would suggest with regards to the council picks for the at-large is maybe we pick a few. Are we thinking about 3 at-large, adding 3 or 4?
Well, if
we're adding the
Youth Commission,
the Youth Commissioner back,
that would be 3. 3. Yeah.
So maybe what we need to do is add 3 at-large members, and then also add 1 or 2 alternates as well. They could encourage them to show up, to participate, to ask questions. However, they do not have a vote unless that member is, off the commission. And I think we probably should be very clear about that. If they step down away from it, then that alternate could come in. It's not a matter of, unless I hear differently, it's not a matter of, I miss a meeting and my alternate shows up and votes in my stead, unless that's what the will of the council. Anyways, that's something for us to kind of think about. This obviously will come back to us in May. We'll have to program it into the agenda, and we could think about it a little bit more. Councilmember Lerone Munoz also mentioned, the possibility of some sort of geographic boundary. I'm open to that as well. So I don't think we have to make decisions tonight as to how it's going to flush out, but it's something for us to figure out as it comes back. Yes, Councilmember Cooper.
Using alternates, does that mean that the attendee could be either the primary or the alternate?
That's the
Or- or
point, that's the point that I was trying to make.
Yeah.
You know, we would have to be very clear on how that would work. And since we
Actually,
don't
I
have,
would like to do it, probably something a little different in the sense for alternates is that in the past, sometimes there were 3 or 4 or 5 members missing. So if we had maybe 3 alternates, they could just step in whenever someone was missing and not really be assigned to an individual, you know what I mean? That way, if there were alternates in the you know what I'm talking about? If there are alternates sitting and observing, and there's 3 or 4 members not there, then they can just step in. They don't have to be a specific alternate to a specific person. That's what I was.
The key thing would be if they are sitting there observing, and if they're just hardly attending, then it's a problem of the continuity of the information.
yeah, and again, I think there is some,
We have to talk about it.
we have to talk about it. I don't want to get bogged down on that with this right here. But I think what I'm hearing from the council is this idea of, one, appointing the youth commission back, getting three at-large members, and the possibility of seeking out alternates for this. And how that gets flushed out, we'll have to work on that.
Mr. Mayor,
Okay?
excuse me, just
Yes.
one real quick question. Just on the first time around with the at-large, the council had directed basically what you've been saying about new blood. That was part of the criteria. That
That's
was
always
part-
the criteria. Yeah,
just
we're
so you
always
know, I
trying
mean,
to get new
I would
blood.
assume we'll keep that as part of the criteria that we start the selection process.
And I also heard, I think it was Councilmember Clucker talk about, you know, in addition to the new blood, but just trying to, well, I'm kind of at a loss for words, but I think the idea is,
We don't want a fresh face every time, every meeting.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay.
That's what we're after.
All right. Okay, so we do, with regards to the possible action, is to approve the proposed work plan, schedule, and budget for the resumption of the 2040 general plan process, approve the revised composition of the general plan advisory committee, and direct the city administrator to execute an agreement with Minatier Harnish for an amount not to exceed $687,000. We have a motion by Councilmember Kat Tucker, seconded by Councilmember Dion Bracco
For all A, B, and C.
for A, B, and C.
But, excuse me, just for clarification, so for B, approve the revised composition of the GPAC committee, that's
That would
include the amendments that you just made?
yes, they include the Youth Commission slot, and then also the 3 at-large members, and I believe that takes us up to 30.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Is the council all still cool with that?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion and a seconded by Councilmember Dion Bracco. All those in favor? Please vote. Nothing's happening on my screen here.
There we go.
There we go. Motion has passed unanimously.